One of the oldest features in Caelesti is my dirt, and by extension my grass, my podzol, and so on, and I think it's about time that I took a look at this dirt again.
Your dirt reminds me of a flake. Other than that, it also reminds me of lasagna. And I don't know why, I'm just a hungry boy.
I absolutely love color maps. They're one of the most effective ways to change a drastic portion of the game with only a very small amount of work, and dirt is something that we can absolutely apply a color map to. What was previously just dirt could now be dry dirt, wet dirt, sandy dirt, rocky dirt, you get the idea. When working with color maps, your texture should ideally be grayscale. We can simulate the final result by adding an additional layer, filling it with color, and then setting the original layer's blend mode to multiply. In order to get a rough starting point for the base color, I've increased the sample size of the color picker, which provides the average color across the given area. I can then use the trick from before to create a new color palette for our grayscale dirt. My old dirt texture used just 4 colors, so I decided to add a 5th color for some extra detail. Yes, I know, just stay with me, it's gonna be worth it, I swear. The next step is to adjust the new dirt textures to work as the grass side texture, which was pretty easy to do. So now we just have to apply the same color map to the grass block. Right, yeah, so grass blocks already have a color map which tints specifically the grass part of the grass block. I really don't see any way we can get around this issue. Sorry guys, I guess it wasn't worth it at all. Well, I guess I'll see you in the next one, so take care, have a nice day, and bye-bye. In vanilla Minecraft, a tint index of 0 simply means that that part of the block model will be tinted. Optifine allowed for targeting specific blocks with additional and custom color maps, but it did not obey the tint index rule that, say, grass blocks do in vanilla. Polytone has come along and implemented an entirely custom color map system that allows you to have not just one, not two, but as many individually tinted or untinted parts of a model as you would like. Banger of a mod. So now that we have full control over the tint index system, the next step is to create all the necessary textures for path, podzol, and mycelium. After that, we'll need to create new template models that separate the tinted and untinted parts of the block, and finally apply all the correct block modifiers in Polytone, including target blocks, render type, and color map. So the grass, path, podzol, and mycelium are now all finished. They're looking pretty good. You can see the top and underside of the dirt block is kind of a bit weird. It's still got a colored texture, which is being tinted by the dirt color map. This same color is also being applied to the underside of the grass-like blocks as well. And we do have a couple of issues with the item versions of each block as well, but I'll get to those shortly. Otherwise, I think this is a really good change. It's quite simple. There's not much of a difference yet, but there's quite a lot of scope here. So I've brought the previous 8 dirt textures into paint.net here, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not very happy with these. I don't really like them. The color palette that I assigned to these is actually slightly different to the dirt side texture, with the lightest and darkest colors being a little bit less contrasted. So what I've done is I've made a slightly different color palette for the new color mapped versions of these textures, and I'm just going to recreate them completely. If you've spent much time in my Discord, this kind of an image probably looks really familiar, but if not, I really wouldn't blame you for thinking this looks quite bizarre. So this is actually the top texture of dirt, and I've swapped it out for this weird geometric texture just to showcase how many things we have to take into consideration when designing this texture. For each of the 8 variants of dirt top texture, we need to make sure that any of the patterns that we have on the sides here seamlessly transition to any of the other 7 variants at any of the other 4 angles of rotation. So there are quite a number of things to take into account when designing a texture like this. But like, while we're here, wouldn't this make a fantastic texture for some variant of glazed terracotta? Whilst designing this texture, I went for a similar idea to the original, which meant highlighting the verticality of the dirt like you can kind of see in this image. Honestly, I'm not sure how else to approach this sort of texture without doing my usual thing of simply exaggerating key features to circumvent the typical difficulty of pixel art, but I think it looks pretty good. Once the texture was finished, I put it in game and then temporarily set it to all 8 of the dirt top textures to see how the texture tiles. So immediately here you can see there are a number of issues with this texture. First of all, we have a number of straight lines on the edge of the dirt block which have created this sort of grid-like pattern that you can see, and there are also a number of occasions as well where you'll end up with one clump of the same color in the corner of these dirt blocks, and these issues are easily resolved, but it's good to see them in game to see what we're dealing with. And with just a tiny bit of work, I've resolved the issue of the grid and also the clump of color in the corners. There are still some grid-like patterns in this texture, but once we have 8 different variants, this will be much better for sure. So So after a few minor adjustments to ensure that each of these textures tile together nicely, I've got this really nice and very random looking texture. You can see there's some quite large details here that just kind of appear by coincidence, like long straight lines or curvy bits or like looped parts, and it all just looks very random. Next up, I want to make sure that the snowy variants of grass, podzol, and mycelium are working correctly. Each of these 3 blocks can check whether or not there is a snow layer or snow block above them and then change their model accordingly. So with this new rendition of the snowy grass, podzol, and mycelium, I wanted to do something a little bit differently. This time around, I want the snow to only partially cover whichever material is on the side of the dirt block. That way you'd still be able to tell which of these blocks it is underneath the snow. And Polytone has allowed us to do this in a really interesting way because we can still tint the grass even underneath the snow. I'll save you the time lapse this time around, but I've now finished the textures for snowy grass, podzol, and mycelium, and I want to talk about them a little bit here. So as stated, grass still has a slight bit of color underneath the snow, so you can see a hint of what color the grass is underneath the snow overlay. This works especially well when you're in cold biomes. You can still see that very bluish grass underneath the snow. I've also given snowy podzol and mycelium a slightly different color palette for the snow, making it go a little bit more brown on the side of podzol and a little bit purple on the side of mycelium. With all of these blocks now set up correctly, we can finally get to the fun part, picking out the colors for the dirt color map. Polytone color maps allow for the creation of biome ID mappers, which essentially allow you to group together whichever biomes you'd like. When I started work on the project, I had to plan out which types of dirt we would have. You've already seen the standard dirt, which appears in plains and forests, but now we can pick out new colors of dirt for the pale garden, swamps, jungles, savanna, and many more. For the pale garden, I've made dirt a very dull and desaturated greyish brown, which perfectly matches the aesthetic of the biome. In swamps and mangroves, dirt is just a little bit more saturated and a little bit darker, which implies a certain amount of humidity and moisture in the area. You can also see how gradual and natural the transition between standard and wet dirt is. In jungles, dirt is more vivid and saturated. Once again, this implies a certain level of moisture and humidity, but it also matches up with the very bright and lush vibe of the jungle. Savannas have to be one of my absolute favourites. I've always disliked how heavily the brown dirt contrasts my very dry and sun-bleached grass, but now the dirt in savanna biomes really matches up with its surroundings. It's also worth noting this type of dirt appears in wooded badlands, which also fits the local style quite well. Ignore that doesn't exist. Stop it. You barely ever find dirt in deserts, but it can be found underground, and the player can of course place dirt here, so I've given it a yellowish and almost sandy appearance. In boreal biomes, such as the taiga and the old growth variants, dirt is just a bit darker. Aside from matching up with the general appearance of these climates, it also makes the relatively bright podzol really pop. In colder regions, dirt is a little bit more blue. The dull and desaturated appearance of the dirt really matches up with the snow, and once again complements the overall feel of the biome. On shorelines, dirt appears to have soaked up a little clay, leaning towards a reddy brown color. And finally, dirt on mushroom islands is just a little bit pink. It fits the color palette of the mushroom field so nicely and also matches up pretty well with the mycelium that grows here. With all that out the way, I've also updated each of the item models. Each of these models use a different variant of their respective block type so that they all look a little bit different.
But Scal, what about the rocky dirt? You told us we were going to get rocky dirt. What about the rocky dirt?
Adding this one feature will require adding 16 new textures for dirt and 8 new textures for all of the dirt variants that we've created so far. So in order to make sure this was going to be worthwhile, I wanted to create a quick mockup, and I think the mockup looks pretty good. In order to get this feature working properly, I'll need to add a bunch of elements to the parent models for dirt, grass, path, podzol, and mycelium. Most of the time, these elements will be displaying a blank texture, but when the block is placed in a specific environment, the texture will be switched out to include the pebbles and the new background to highlight those pebbles. And here it is, pebbly dirt, which will appear in some of the colder and high altitude biomes in the game. In order to make this feature work consistently, I've had to apply the pebble overlay to every single one of the dirt blocks that we've worked on so far. This means adding it for dirt, path, grass, podzol, and mycelium, and the snowy variants of those last 3, which now means that if you took some mycelium and brought it to a mountain, you could technically end up with cold dirt mycelium with snow on it with pebbles. How did we get here? At this point in the video, you're probably thinking, like, are we done yet? Is dirt complex enough yet? No, there's still more that we can do. With most of my color maps so far, I've only really been utilizing the x-axis, which allows us to check for which biome the current block is placed in. However, we can adjust the y-axis parameter to use this little expression, which will simply check for which height the block is currently placed at. In the Caves and Cliffs update, Minecraft was adjusted to have a negative y-axis value, which was kind of a nightmare for color maps, but we can use this expression with Polytone to simply simply add 64 to the current height and then divide it by 384, which is the total height available in the overworld. With this new expression set up, we can expand the color map vertically to include the height of the terrain in the game. I've already highlighted this section in the center of the color map, which indicates where Y64 is. Just a fun little bit while the color map is looking a bit weird here. This is one of the only issues I've run into with Polytone so far. The vertical height map does not have any sort of blending. So those two white lines that are on the dirt color map right now, they're just white lines. There's no blending like you would usually get between biomes. It's just a straight cut off to colored, uncolored, colored. Okay. I've added in 2 extra lines here, which signify the start of Deep Slate. Anything underneath that is going to have its own unique color as well. I would simply never recommend the use of gradients in resource pack development, but when it comes to color maps, it is the best way of doing things, especially given that Polytone does not have the ability to blend vertically. As you're making your way down through the world, you'll find that the dirt transitions from its naturally assigned color based on the biome above, down to a generic chalky gray color, and as you start to hit Deep Slate, this effect gets even more extreme, and that chalky gray quickly turns into a dull dark brown. My super flat world is like at 0. You see, like the ground level is 0, so the dirt's all really dark now. I think that just about does it for my enhanced dirt. There are a couple of things that are still yet to be done, like coarse dirt, farmland, and rooted dirt, but we can come back to those in the future. The main 5 are now finished, which is what I really wanted to get done in this video. The first video I made in this style about the backface glass has performed really well. I'm really happy to see all the new subscribers and viewers and supporters of the channel. I do have a few more ideas for videos of this style, so if you want to catch those and the next update to Caelesti, then please do subscribe. Finally, if you want to get your hands on the dirt seen in this video, you'll have to wait around for update 46 of Caelesti, which should be coming in the next few weeks or months if I'm as inconsistent as usual. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, take care, have a nice day, and bye-bye.